I want to tell you about the day I arrived. Not metaphorically, the literal day when everything I had worked for was finally, completely, undeniably in place. The house, the career, the title, the respect, the financial security, the life that other men pointed to and called successful. It was a Tuesday in November. I was 55 years old, and I sat in the middle of everything I had built and felt absolutely nothing. Not relief, not pride, not satisfaction. Nothing. And that nothing, that specific, hollow, terrifying nothing, was the most important thing that ever happened to me. My name is Stanley. I am 82 years old. I spent 30 years in corporate finance, CFO of a mid-sized company by the time I was 50. The kind of man whose biography, if you wrote it using only external facts, would look like a straight line of upward progress. Good school, good career, good house, good family, by which I mean a wife who stayed, and children who turned out well despite my frequent absence. By every metric available to measure a life from the outside, I succeeded. And I want to tell you what that looks like from the inside, because nobody tells you that part. The people who have arrived do not often talk about what they found when they got there. And the silence around that particular truth is, I think, one of the most costly silences in modern life. You have a picture in your mind of what your life will look like when it is working. Not a vague picture, a specific one. You may not have articulated it fully, but it is there. A particular level of income, a particular kind of home, a particular professional standing, a particular way that other people respond to you when you walk into a room. And you are working toward that picture. Maybe consciously, with a plan. Maybe unconsciously, just following the gradient of what feels like progress. And underneath the work, underneath the strategy and the effort and the sacrifice, there is a belief. The belief that when the picture is complete, something will change. Not just externally, internally. That the achievement will produce a feeling, a lasting feeling of yes. This. I made it. I am okay. I am here to tell you something about that belief. It is the most widespread and the most costly misconception in modern life, not because achievement is meaningless, but because the feeling you are expecting from it, the internal resolution, the sense of fundamental okayness, does not live in the achievement. It never did. And the proof of that is in every person who has arrived and found the emptiness I found on that Tuesday in November. There are more of us than you think. We just don't talk about it. Let me tell you about the specific Tuesday. We had just closed the largest deal in the company's history. My leadership had been central to it. The board was pleased. The CEO sent a handwritten note, the kind of gesture that signals genuine recognition at that level. My bonus that year was the largest I had ever received. My daughter was getting married the following spring to a man I genuinely liked. My son had just finished his degree. My wife and I had recently bought the house we had talked about for 15 years, a place in the country, more space than we needed, exactly what the picture had always included. Everything was, by any honest accounting, good. I remember the morning of that particular Tuesday clearly. I woke up early. I always did, and I lay in bed in the dark for a few minutes doing what I usually did, running through the day's agenda, the week's priorities, the month's objectives. And then something happened that had never happened before. I ran out of agenda. For the first time in perhaps 30 years, I could not think of a pressing problem to solve. Not because everything was resolved, there were always problems in a business, but because in that specific moment, for reasons I could not explain, the machinery of my mind simply stopped producing the next thing. And in that silence, in the space where the agenda usually lived, I felt it. The nothing, not peace. Peace has a texture, a warmth. This was different. This was the feeling of a man who had organized his entire inner life around the pursuit of something, and who had arrived at that something, and who discovered that the something had not been hiding a feeling inside it. It was just a thing, a collection of circumstances, a set of facts about a life. Internally, I was exactly the same man I had been at 35. The same quiet anxieties, the same specific loneliness that I had carried for decades, a loneliness that had nothing to do with being alone, since I was surrounded by people, but with a sense of not being fully known by any of them. The same restless sense that I was performing a version of myself rather than actually being a person. The achievement had not touched any of that. It had not been designed to. I had just assumed it would. I got up, made coffee, went to the office, did my job. And that evening, sitting in the kitchen while my wife cooked dinner, I tried to explain to her what had happened, what I had felt that morning. I am not, by nature or by training, an expressive man. I do not easily put internal experiences into words. But I tried, and she looked at me for a long time when I finished. And then she said something that I have thought about almost every day since. She said, "Stanley, I have been waiting for you to feel that for 20 years. Not unkindly, not as criticism. Just as a statement of fact from a woman who had watched me chase something for 2 decades and had understood, long before I did, that the thing I was chasing was not what I thought it was." I asked her what she meant. She said, "You have been looking outside yourself for something that was always going to have to come from inside. The promotion was never going to give it to you. The house was never going to give it to you. I couldn't give it to you. You're the only one who can give it to you." I was 55 years old, and my wife had understood in our marriage something about me that I had not understood about myself. That is a particular kind of grace, and a particular kind of grief. I want to explain what I think was actually happening. Not just for me, but for the many people, men especially, in my experience, who build their lives around external achievement and find the emptiness I found. We are taught from very early on to locate our worth outside ourselves, not explicitly usually, but through the consistent structure of reward and recognition that shapes us from childhood. You get the grade, you get the praise, you perform well, you get the approval. You achieve the thing, you get the validation. And gradually, through years of this conditioning, we develop a functional belief so deep it feels like fact rather than belief that our worth is located in our performance, that we are okay when we succeed, and not quite okay when we don't. And the corollary to that belief, the logical extension of it, is that if we achieve enough, we will finally feel permanently okay, permanently worthy, permanently justified in our existence. That is the chase. Not the money, not the title, not the house, the feeling of finally being enough. And the reason the arrival is empty is not because achievement is meaningless. It is because the thing you are actually chasing, the felt sense of being fundamentally worthy, is not an external object that can be obtained. It is an internal state that can only be chosen. You can choose it at 25 before you have achieved anything. You can choose it at 55 sitting in the middle of everything you built. You can choose it at 82, looking back at the architecture of a life and understanding finally what it was all in service of. But you cannot arrive at it. You can only decide it. And every year you spend trying to arrive at it through external means is a year you are looking for something in a place where it cannot be found. My wife's name was Carol. She died 6 years ago. And in the years between that Tuesday morning and her death, in the 21 years of marriage that followed the moment, she told me she had been waiting for me to feel that for 20 years. Something gradually changed, not overnight, not dramatically, but consistently, quietly, in the direction of something real. I started, for the first time in my adult life, to ask different questions. Not how do I achieve the next thing, but what is this life actually for? Not what do others think of this decision, but what do I actually think? What do I actually want? What actually matters to me, separated from what I have been conditioned to pursue? Those questions are harder than they sound. For a man who has spent 30 years not asking them, They are genuinely disorienting, but they are the right questions. And the answers that came slowly, imperfectly, over years, were the beginning of a life that felt, for the first time, like mine. Not successful in the external sense, not impressive from the outside, but mine, built around things I actually cared about rather than things I had been told to care about, organized around the people and experiences and quiet pleasures that genuinely nourished me rather than the metrics that had organized my first 55 years. It was a smaller life in some ways, quieter. It was the best life I have had, and I got 21 more years of it with Carol before she was gone. 21 years of being actually present in a marriage rather than performing the role of a successful husband. I wish I had started 30 years earlier, but I am grateful I started at all. I want to ask you to do something uncomfortable. I want you to separate two things that most people keep tangled together their entire lives. The first thing is your circumstances, your income, your career, your status, your achievements, your external life. The second thing is your sense of your own worth, whether you feel fundamentally okay, whether you feel like you belong here, whether you feel like you matter. Most people have those two things tangled so tightly together that they cannot see them as separate. I want you to try to see them separately, and then ask yourself, what would I have to believe about my worth if I stripped away everything external? If the career was gone, the title was gone, the income was gone, the achievement was gone, what would be left? Would you still be okay? If the honest answer is no, if your sense of your own okayness is genuinely conditional on things outside you, then that is the work, not the next achievement, not the next rung. The internal work of separating your worth from your performance. That work is difficult. It may require help, a therapist, a genuine conversation with someone you trust, time alone with questions that don't have easy answers, but it is the most important work you will ever do. Because everything else, every achievement, every relationship, every experience is filtered through it. If you don't feel fundamentally okay inside yourself, nothing outside will make you feel it. And if you do, if you genuinely, groundedly feel your own worth as something that does not require external confirmation, everything outside becomes richer, cleaner, more genuinely enjoyed, because you are no longer consuming it as proof of something. You are just experiencing it. That is the life I found at 55. Late, but found. Tell me in the comments, have you ever arrived somewhere you had been working toward and felt the emptiness instead of the satisfaction? Not as a failure, as information. Because if you have, you already know what I'm talking about. And you already know what the real work is.